In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at General Veers for the Saga collection. He was one of the first action figures released in the Saga collection, being figure number 7. I've had this in my collection since 2006, and I think, I'm trying to think, this was one of the very first Saga collection action figures I ever got, actually. Of course, this was during the time the line was debuting and was initially released. And I never really found General Veers at retail very much, actually. I've been to, at the time I was on the hunt specifically for him, and I went to so many different of the major retailers in my area, and I mean several, in various cities at the time. I happened to be traveling, so I happened to stop at all the Walmarts and all the other grocery stores along the way just to see if he was there. And I never found him anywhere. But I did. There was, funnily enough, when I finally got back to my hometown, I went to my local grocery store here, and they had a whole bunch of them on pegs, a whole bunch of Veers, probably like 10 to 20 of them. And it was ridiculous. It's like all these other stores didn't have a single one, and then I go back to my hometown as the last resort, and then there's a whole bunch of them on the shelves. But luckily I got one, and I'm happy to own it in my collection. This was actually one of the very first Imperial officers I ever got, and I think he might actually be the very first one. And it's a great way to start it off, and he's, even to this day, I still think he's one of the best Imperial officers that Hasbro's ever released. There's a lot of nice features about it. The sculpt of it's really good. I think it looks exactly like the actor that played as General Veers, who's the same guy that was in The Last Crusade as Donovan. I'm trying to think what his name was. I'm drawing a blank on it, though. He was very familiar with Lucasfilm throughout the years, and I'm sure I've seen him in other things here and there as well. So General Veers, very interesting character. He's, at least in Empire at War, he was like basically the mastermind behind the AT-AT, which is pretty interesting. And he's had a pretty interesting backstory in all Star Wars. I've read about his character multiple times, and there's various different angles that I've seen his story taking place. I've even seen one scenario where a snowspeeder crashes in his AT-AT immediately at the end of the Battle of Hoth, and then he ends up losing his legs or something like that. But then I've seen other ones where he goes on and becomes a decorated officer and serves in the Empire till many years later even. So he's had a story that's been written and rewritten so many times. And this was before even the Disney takeover. So kind of a conflicted character, I would say. But for the action figure here, I think it's still one of the best in the Saga collection, and I still think it is a very reputable figure that Hasbro made. So we'll just go ahead and take a closer look at this guy. So for being a 17-year-old action figure at this point, that head sculpt is really good. That almost looks as good as a lot of the photoreal. In fact, I would say it is as good as a lot of the photoreal faces we get today. The sculpt, the paint, everything about it is perfect. It's very crisp. I'm really impressed with how that turned out. It looks exactly like the character. As far as the tooling is concerned, I don't think this has been used for any other Imperial officer before. This is very specific to General Veers. And, I mean, it kind of makes sense. He's a unique enough character where I think he warrants his own specific tooling. He's not really one that you can just reuse for so many different officers and then they look the same. And one feature about him that I think would warrant the unique tooling, and that's because his armor does snap off, which we'll show here in a second. As far as uniform, pretty standard for an Imperial officer. He's a very tall character as well, which I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. We never really get a good enough look at General Veers and Empire Strikes Back to know exactly what his height is. I would not doubt if he is a taller character, though. And for his boots there, looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and take the armor off here. So you take his helmet off, which fits just right over his cap there. The cap is not removable. But it fits pretty good. Never had any problems with that. Then his armor here just snaps out of place. And then you can, it's almost like a 2-in-1 figure where you can turn General Veers into his standard officer's uniform, which looks really good. You do have the grooves on the sides there to where the armor will snap in, but it's never really been a problem. In fact, in some ways, it kind of complements the outfit. And you barely notice it anyway, especially if you look at them straight on. But even at certain angles, it really doesn't seem that noticeable. For his rank badge there, that's just painted on. I don't think that's really sculpted on. I think that's accurate. That's definitely a higher or a senior officer's rank. I'm not sure exactly which one, but I would assume that's probably in the general category. Has his belt there, and the holster that you saw me take the E11 out of. Has his hair sculpted on there. And yeah, I'm just really impressed with that face sculpt there. Definitely one of the best at the time, and it still holds up nice. So in terms of the articulation, he does have a ball joint at the head, then he does have swivel shoulders, swivel forearm, or swivel elbows, I mean, which some people have a problem with this, but I think it's alright for this action figure. I mean, you're either going to get him with his hands behind his back like this, or you're going to have it where it's like he's holding his belt, getting ready to go into battle. Or even if you want him in a shooting pose, he's really not going to do much more than that, for instance. So I think you could pretty much get him in any pose you want with his elbows as is, and I don't have a personal problem with it. He does have swivel wrists as well, then swivel waist, then swivel hips, then swivel boots actually, at where the knee is. So that does help with his stance a little bit more, but he doesn't really have a problem standing anyway if you work with him a little bit. Yeah, he's pretty stable right there. But still, the articulation, it's not the best articulation in the world, but it's certainly good enough, I think, to get the point across, and you can get him in just about all the poses that you'd want him in anyway. Most likely, if you're going to have this guy in a diorama, you're just going to have him in a side commanding an AT-AT anyway, behind the drivers, and this serves its purpose. So in terms of the accessories, of course he has his helmet here, which has some really nice detailing in it. See, he has his goggles there. It has the communicator on the side. The goggles are not removable. It's just sculpted in place, which is perfectly fine. The vintage collection AT-AT Commander had it where the goggles were a separate piece, and then you can never be able to get that over the helmet unless you boiled it. So in this case, that eliminates that issue. He has his armor here, which does have this extended piece to go over his belt. Has the rank badge there, and has some sculpting in it. Various colors for the buttons. The armor does not go to the back though, which I don't think is that really much of a big deal. Then he does have the standard E11. Nothing much more I can really say about that. But it does fit well into his right hand here. Like I said, you can get him in a shooting pose like that. I don't think it really fits in his left hand too well. You can kind of hold it, but it won't be too well. Then if you wanted to, you could get him hold it with both hands, which looks pretty good like that. Or you can have him in a shooting pose like that. That seems reasonable. Then, of course, it will fit in his holster there. You kind of get it where he's a public speaker as well. Looks like a pose that they would do. Then for his other accessories, he does have the Saga Collection stand here. Empire Strikes Back. It says General Veers there. And he does fit on the stand pretty good. Of course, I don't really have them displayed on the stand so much anymore. It's usually these ones. But someday, if I get a new display shelf, maybe I'll go back to using those stands for the figures. And for the random hologram figure, I don't think it came with a red Darth Vader. I think he came with a blue Darth Vader, actually. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to show off the red one. I haven't actually showed off any of the Vaders yet, this is the one that I commonly got most at the time. I got a whole bunch of these Vaders, both red and blue. Even though these are all random based upon the action figure, I think they kind of lined up with the particular character. Like General Veers, he wasn't going to get a bunch of Obi-Wans or Yodas or anything like that. He was probably going to get more Stormtroopers and Vaders and Palpatines, more holograms like that. Of course, like Luke Skywalker is probably going to get more Lukes and Obi-Wans and Yodas for their holograms and less Palpatines and Vaders. But still, this Vader is a pretty good sculpt. If you hold it up to the light in certain ways as well, or if you take a flashlight and shine on it, it's very reflective. Looks like a regular hologram, or a real hologram. Does have the Empire symbol underneath. And yeah, that's a really good sculpt. I like getting these though, they're fun to collect. And then if you can get them all, then you can make your own little hologram display out of it. Maybe you can make your own table and then have all these interact with one another. And of course for Vader it makes sense, or for Veers here it makes sense to have a Vader, because it'd be like that scene in Empire Strikes Back where Veers informs him that the shield will be down in moments. You can start your landing. So yeah, for the armor here, it just snaps into place. No problem there at all. And for his helmet there, it just fits on top. And for comparison purposes, I will bring out the Vintage Collection AT-AT Commander here. Of course, they're two separate characters. It gives you an idea what they're like. And like I said, these goggles here, I can't get them to fit over unless I boil the helmet. But I don't really want them to get stuck in place forever, so I just have them hold it instead. They do look pretty good together. So would I recommend General Veers for your collection? I totally would. I think this is one of the best action figures that Hasbro made for the Saga collection. And it still holds up really good today. I still think it's one of the best Imperial officers that Hasbro made. And the face sculpt and the face paint alone far exceed, I think, a lot of the officers we get today even. And overall, the tooling is good enough. I mean, yes, it's nice to have super articulated Imperial officers, but again, how many poses are you really going to get those guys in? Not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. But this one meets pretty much every pose that you're going to want him in. So it's a solid action figure all around. I don't know what the prices are so much these days. The last time I checked, it seemed like it was a little bit more on the pricier side compared to a lot of the Saga collection figures. Maybe in the $20 or $30 range, which I still think is totally worth it for this guy. So if you don't have them for your collection and you're wanting to expand on your Imperial officers, I would suggest you get them. There is the possibility we may, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't doubt if at some point we do get a TVC release of General Veers. But I imagine it's going to be reutilizing that new sculpt. which if you're a big fan of that, perhaps you're going to want to wait for that for a couple more years. And I don't know for sure if Hasbro's going to make one, but I just have this feeling that we may, especially since it's been 17 years since we got Veers. But regardless, even if you do plan on getting that, I would still suggest getting this one. If you don't have it, you need it. Solid action figure all around. One of my favorites. It's been in my collection for 17, almost 18 years now, and I cherish it greatly. But anyways, that concludes this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for plenty more reviews in the future. There will always be lots more to come. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate all your support. And check out some links in the description if you have not done so already. And as always, thanks for watching.